Expert found the mysterious symbol in a 1901 photo from Gettysburg. This wasn't supposed to be there. Before we start, just a reminder. If you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get to the video. The disturbing discovery. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her reading glasses as she examined the collection of historical photographs that had just arrived at the Civil War Studies Institute at the University of Pennsylvania. As a specialist in mid-century military iconography, she had seen thousands of images from Gettysburg, but this particular 1901 photograph had left her completely baffled. The sepia-toned image showed a peaceful field in Gettysburg, with the characteristic gentle hills stretching toward the horizon. A damaged wooden fence crossed the landscape, a silent testament to the events that had taken place there 38 years earlier. In the foreground, 3 Civil War veterans, solemnly, their old uniforms carefully preserved for the commemorative occasion. They held their hats over their chests in a gesture of respect for their fallen comrades. But what had captured Sarah's attention wasn't the main scene, but a detail that seemed completely out of place. Carved sharply into a stone behind the veterans, partially covered by moss, appeared a geometric symbol that didn't correspond to any known military or religious emblem of the era. The symbol consisted of a double circle interlaced by diagonal lines that intersected in a complex and precise pattern. What was most disturbing was that natural light fell upon the symbol in a strangely precise manner, highlighting it as if it had been carved recently, contrasting dramatically with the moss and natural erosion that characterized the rest of the stone. "This wasn't supposed to be there," Sarah murmured, using a magnifying glass to examine the symbol more closely. The photograph had been donated by the Thornton family, descendants of one of the veterans who appear in the image, Sergeant Major William Thornton of the 15th Pennsylvania Infantry. Sarah had dedicated the last 15 years of her career to cataloging and analyzing Civil War military symbology. She knew every insignia, every regimental emblem, every Masonic and religious symbol used by troops on both sides. But this symbol was completely unknown to her. The photograph had been taken during one of the first veterans' reunions at Gettysburg, when survivors of the battle returned to the field to honor their fallen companions. These reunions had become increasingly popular in the early 20th century, as aging veterans felt the urgency to preserve their memories before it was too late. Dr. Harrison, Sarah called to her colleague, Professor James Harrison, a specialist in American military history. "I need you to see this immediately." Professor Harrison, a 50-year-old man with a gray beard and an impeccable reputation in Civil War studies, approached with curiosity. When Sarah pointed out the symbol on the stone, his expression changed completely. "Are you certain this photograph is authentic?" he asked, after examining the image for several minutes. "Completely," Sarah replied. "I've verified the provenance, the photographic technique, the paper type, everything corresponds to me." "Doesn't belong to that era," Harrison completed. "In fact, it doesn't belong to any era I know of." Both researchers fell silent, contemplating the implications of what they had discovered. If the photograph was authentic, and everything indicated it was, then someone had carved that mysterious symbol into a stone on the Gettysburg battlefield before none. But who? And why? "We need to investigate this thoroughly," Sarah decided. "If there's a logical explanation for this symbol, we'll find it. And if there isn't, then we'll have discovered something that could change our understanding of Gettysburg's history," Harrison completed. The weight of their discovery began to settle in as they continued examining the photograph under different lighting conditions. Sarah noticed that the edges of the image showed the characteristic aging patterns of authentic 1901 photography. The slight fading, irregular borders, and aging marks that would be nearly impossible to forge. Convincingly, yet the symbol appeared almost anachronistically clear, as if it existed in a different temporal dimension from the rest of the scene. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to the way shadows fell across the photograph. The lighting on everything else is consistent with late afternoon sun, probably around 4 p.m. based on the shadow angles. But the symbol, it's illuminated as if there's a separate light source. Harrison leaned closer, his experienced eye catching details that would escape most observers. The veterans' uniforms saw the wear patterns, typical of ceremonial dress from that period, carefully maintained but showing their age. The landscape matches other documented photographs of Gettysburg from the early 19th. Everything checks out, except for that symbol, Sarah finished. It's like someone inserted it into the photograph, but not photographically. It's actually there, carved into the stone, but it doesn't belong to that time period. During the following weeks, Sarah and Professor Harrison immersed themselves in exhaustive research. They began by examining all available records about Sergeant Major William Thornton and the other two veterans who appear in the photograph, Corporal Samuel Morrison of the 72nd Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment and Private David Chen, a Chinese immigrant who had served in the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment. Chen's presence in the photograph was notable in itself. Soldiers of Asian origin had been extremely rare in the Civil War, and for one to have survived to participate in veterans' reunions was almost unprecedented. Chen is a historical anomaly, Harrison observed while reviewing military records. According to these documents, he enlisted in beyond the then Nosatiantis entities using the name David Chen, but there are indications that wasn't his real name. The military records painted an intriguing picture. Chen had enlisted in Boston, claiming to be 22 years old, though his actual age was difficult to verify. His enlistment papers showed unusual details. He was listed as literate in both English and Oriental languages, and his occupation was recorded as scholar-interpreter. Most enlisted men were farmers, laborers, or craftsmen. Scholars were rare, especially among immigrant populations. Look at his service record, Sarah noted, spreading the documents across their research table. He was assigned to special duties almost immediately after basic training. Not typical combat roles, but reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Intelligence in 1963. The Union Army was more sophisticated than most people realize, Sarah explained. They had networks of spies, scouts, and information gatherers. Someone with Chen's linguistic abilities and cultural knowledge would have been invaluable. Sarah had been investigating the history of the stone, where the symbol appeared carved. Using historical maps and period photographs, she had managed to identify the exact location. It was near Little Round Top, in an area that had seen intense fighting during the July. The strange thing, Sarah explained while showing Harrison a detailed battlefield map, is that this stone doesn't appear in any photographs taken immediately after the battle. The first images showing it date from the sea. Are you suggesting the stone was placed there after the battle? Harrison asked. It's possible. Or perhaps the symbol was carved years after the battle, but before 1909. Their research into the battlefield's post-war history revealed fascinating details. In the decades following the battle, Gettysburg had become a pilgrimage site for veterans, families of the fallen, and curiosity seekers. The battlefield had been gradually transformed from a working agricultural landscape back into a memorial park. During this process, many stones, monuments, and markers had been moved, repositioned, or newly installed. There's something else, Sarah said, pulling out a surveyor's map from when this area near Little Round Top was excavated in the 1980s as part of the battlefield preservation efforts. They were looking for unexploded ordnance and artifacts. It's possible they uncovered the stone during that process. To deepen their investigation, they decided to consult an expert in ancient symbology. Marcus Webb from Harvard University was internationally recognized for his work on historical and occult symbol systems. When Sarah emailed him images of the symbol, Webb's response was immediate and alarming. This symbol doesn't belong to any known system from the Civil War era. In fact, the geometric elements that compose it don't appear in Western iconography until the early 20th century, and even then, only in very specific contexts related to secret societies and occultist movements. Webb had identified elements of the symbol that resembled iconography used by certain European Masonic lodges, but with modifications he had never seen before. The interlaced double circle was particularly intriguing as it tinted influences from Eastern esoteric tradition. The precision of the carving is remarkable, Webb noted in a follow-up email. This wasn't done by an amateur. Whoever created the symbol had extensive knowledge of sacred geometry and symbolic representation. The proportions are mathematically precise, the kind of precision that requires both artistic skill and deep understanding of symbolic meaning. Webb's analysis revealed additional layers of complexity. The diagonal lines weren't random. They followed specific geometric principles found in ancient Chinese feng shui practices. The double circle incorporated elements similar to Celtic knotwork, but with modifications that suggested cross-cultural synthesis. Could it be related to David Chen? Sarah wondered. If he was of Chinese origin, he might have introduced symbolic elements from his native culture. Research into Chen revealed fascinating information. Although official records were scarce, Sarah found references to him in other veterans' memoirs. Apparently, Chen had been known among his companions for his knowledge of mystical arts and his ability to predict weather and other natural events. One veteran had written in his memoirs, David Chen was a mysterious man. He spoke little about his past, but had a way of knowing things the rest of us couldn't understand. During the Battle of Gettysburg, he warned us about the Confederate attack on Little Round Top hours before it began. He said he could read the signs in the order. Another account, found in the personal papers of a Union officer, provided more details. Private demonstrated unusual abilities during our reconnaissance mission. He could determine enemy positions by observing subtle changes in the landscape, disturbed earth, altered vegetation patterns, even changes in bird behavior. His methods seemed almost supernatural, but his intelligence proved consistently accurate. The more they learned about Chen, the more mysterious he became. Unlike most immigrants of the period, who left extensive paper trails through employment records, census data, and community involvement, Chen seemed to have lived almost aimlessly. He appeared in military records, then disappeared from official documentation, until the veterans' reunions began in the year. It's as if he deliberately avoided leaving traces, Harrison observed. That takes considerable effort and knowledge of how bureaucratic systems work. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Sarah received a call from Margaret Thornton, Sergeant Major William Thornton's great-granddaughter. Margaret had been following the research through academic media and had information that might be relevant. Mitchell, Margaret said during their meeting in Philadelphia, my family always knew there was something special about that photograph, but we never understood what it was. My great-grandfather left a diary that mentions strange events during the veterans' reunion. William Thornton's diary, carefully preserved by the family for more than a century, contained entries that shed new light on the 19th events. July 15. Assess contained entries that shed new light on the 19th events. July 15. We have returned to Gettysburg for the annual reunion. David Chen has come from California. Despite his advanced age, there's something different about him this year. An urgency I hadn't seen before. He talks constantly about completing the circle and honoring the spirits of the fallen. July 17 Chen led Samuel and me to a place near Little Round Top that he says is sacred. There was a stone there that I didn't remember seeing before. Chen insisted we pose for a photograph by the stone, saying it was important to document it the moment. There was something carved in the stone that I couldn't understand. July 18. Chen left this morning without saying goodbye. He left a note saying his work here was finished. Samuel and I are confused by his behavior, but decided not to ask questions. Some secrets are better left buried. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she read the diary entries. It was evident that Chen had been directly involved in creating or revealing the symbol on the stone. But there were additional entries that Margaret hadn't initially shared, entries that painted an even more complex picture of the events. July 16 painted an even more complex picture of the events. July 16 sometimes walking in precise patterns around it. He carried a small bag of tools, not military tools, but instruments I didn't recognize. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was awakening what was already there. I don't understand what he meant. Chile, 17 evening. After the photograph was taken, Chen performed some kind of ceremony. He burned herbs that filled the air with strange scents and spoke in a language I couldn't identify. Not English, not any European language I've heard. Samuel and Asim felt compelled to remain silent and still. There was something profound happening, something beyond our understanding. July 98 meanwhile ending Ventoluno. I've been thinking about Chen's words. He said the symbol was already there, and that he was only awakening. Could it have been carved during the battle itself? Could someone have marked this place during those terrible days in Wetion, Sadoses and Taitetais? But who would have had the time or inclination for such work during a battle? Does your family preserve any other documents related to Chen? Sarah asked Margaret. Not directly, but my great-grandfather mentioned that Chen had given him something before departing. A small object that should be kept for future generations. My family has preserved it, although we never understood its significance. Margaret took a small wooden box from her purse. Inside was a bronze medallion, showing the same symbol that appeared in the photograph, but with additional details that weren't visible on the stone. My God, Sarah murmured while examining the medallion. This changes everything. The medallion was exquisitely crafted, showing a level of artisanship that spoke of professional skill and considerable time investment. The bronze had been worked with techniques that Sarah recognized from her studies of 19th century metalworking, but the design incorporated elements that seemed to draw from multiple cultural traditions. The medallion not only confirmed that Chen had been responsible for the symbol, but suggested it was part of a more complex system of symbols and meanings. On the reverse of the medallion was an inscription in Chinese characters that Sarah couldn't read, surrounded by smaller symbols that appeared to be astronomical or mathematical in nature. There's something else, Margaret said, reaching into the box again. Chen left this note with the medallion. My great-grandfather kept it, even though he couldn't read it. The note was written in English, but in a careful, formal hand that suggested someone for whom English was not a native language. To Sergeant Thornton, keeper of memories and guardian of honor. This token represents work that began in darkness and must continue in light. The symbol marks a place where many brave souls departed this world in violence and confusion. It serves now as a beacon to guide them home and a reminder to the living that death is not the end of service. Keep this safe. Future generations will understand what we could not. We need to find an expert in Chinese language, Sarah decided. And we need to know more about who David Chen really was. The note raised as many questions as it answered. Chen's reference to work that began in darkness suggested his involvement with the symbol predated the night. His mention of future generations implied he expected his work to be discovered and understood at some later time. Most intriguingly, his description of the symbol as a beacon suggested it served a specific spiritual or metaphysical purpose. Sarah photographed the medallion and note from multiple angles, ensuring they captured every detail. The craftsmanship of the medallion was remarkable. The bronze had been cast and then hand-finished with tools that left distinctive marks. These marks might provide clues about where and when the medallion had been made. Margaret, do you know if your great-grandfather ever tried to research Chen's background? Sarah asked. He did, actually. There are some letters in our family papers, correspondence with the War Department and with veterans organizations. He was trying to find out more about Chen's service record and his life after the war, but he never found much. Margaret produced another folder from her bag. These are copies of the letters. My great-grandfather was quite persistent, but he kept running into dead ends. It was as if Chen had deliberately obscured his trail. The correspondence revealed Thornton's growing frustration with his search. Letter after letter to government offices, veterans groups, and military historians had yielded little information. Chen's service record was minimal, his post-war life virtually undocumented, and his origins remained mysterious. One letter from a clerk at the War Department was particularly telling. We have found no records of David Chen beyond his basic enlistment and discharge papers. This is unusual, as most veterans of his unit have extensive documentation. It appears that certain records may have been removed or restricted, though we have no information about why this might have occurred. The search for information about David Chen led Sarah and Professor Harrison to West Coast Immigration Archives. There, with the help of Linda Wong, a specialist in Chinese immigration history in the United States, they began to unravel the mysterious veteran's true identity. David Chen wasn't his real name, Dr. Wong explained, after examining the records. According to immigration documents found, his real name was Chen Wei-ming, and he arrived in the United States in 1962, not as a common immigrant, but as part of a secret diplomatic mission. The documents revealed that Chen Wei-ming had been sent by the Qing dynasty government to observe and report on the American Civil War. China was interested in the military tactics and technologies being developed during the conflict, information that could be valuable for their own internal conflicts. Dr. Wong had uncovered a treasure trove of information in the Chinese language newspapers of the period. These papers, largely ignored by mainstream historians, contained detailed accounts of Chinese immigrants' experiences and occasionally mentioned individuals involved in unusual activities. Chen Wei-ming was no ordinary observer. Wong explained as he translated excerpts from a San Francisco Chinese newspaper dated it. According to this article, he was a scholar warrior, trained in both military arts and spiritual practices. The newspaper describes him as a bridge builder between worlds, someone capable of understanding and working within different cultural systems. The newspaper accounts painted a picture of a man caught between worlds. Chen had been educated in traditional Chinese philosophy and martial arts, but had also studied Western science and military tactics. His mission to America had been both practical and spiritual, to gather intelligence about Western military capabilities while also studying how Eastern wisdom might be applied in Western contexts. But something changed, Dr. Wong continued. Instead of returning to China as planned, Chen decided to stay and enlist in the Union Army. Records suggest he had developed a deep spiritual connection with American soil. The Chinese newspapers provided clues about this transformation. In 1863, Chen had written a letter to a Chinese newspaper explaining his decision to remain in America. I came to this land as an observer, but I have become a participant. The great conflict that tears this nation apart is not merely a political struggle, but a spiritual crisis that affects all who dwell here. I have seen the spirits of the fallen crying out for peace, and I believe the wisdom of our ancestors can help bring that peace. He will serve me in their army not as a Chinese spy, but as a healer of wounds that go deeper than flesh. The inscription on the medallion, translated by Dr. Wong, revealed even more mysteries. To honor the spirits of the brave fallen, and ensure their sacrifice is not forgotten. May the symbol serve as a bridge between worlds. It's fascinating, Dr. Wang commented. Chen seems to have combined elements of traditional Chinese philosophy with his experience in the American Civil War. The symbol he created is a unique fusion of Eastern and Western traditions. Wang's research revealed that the Chen had been part of a small but significant community of Chinese intellectuals who had come to America during the Civil War period. Unlike the laborers who would later build the transcontinental railroads, these men were educated observers sent by the Chinese government to study Western military and political developments. The Qing dynasty was facing its own internal conflicts, Dr. Wang explained. The Taiping Rebellion was devastating China, and the government was desperate for new military strategies and technologies. They sent observers to study conflicts around the world, hoping to find solutions to their own problems. But Chen's mission ascent evolved beyond simple observation. The Chinese newspapers revealed that he had become deeply involved in what they called spiritual warfare, the belief that military conflicts had metaphysical dimensions that could be addressed through proper spiritual practices. Sarah had been researching in parallel in National Park Service archives, looking for any official reference to the symbol or unusual activities at Gettysburg during the early veterans' reunions. What she found left her breathless. In addition to the report, a park ranger had written, "Unusual activity has been reported near Little Round Top during veterans' reunions. Some visitors have reported strange lights and unexplained sounds near a stone marked with unknown symbols. I recommend additional investigation." But there were no records that any investigation had been conducted. The report had been filed and apparently forgotten. However, Sarah's deeper research revealed a pattern of similar reports from other Civil War battlefields. At Antietam, Shiloh, and Bull Run, park rangers and visitors had reported unusual phenomena associated with stones or markers that bore unfamiliar symbols. In each case, the reports had been filed and forgotten, but the pattern suggested a coordinated effort. "It's as if someone wanted to keep this secret," Harrison observed. "But why?" The answer came from an unexpected source. While researching in the Pennsylvania Historical Society archives, Sarah found a letter dated written by an army officer to the Secretary of War. "Secretary, I must inform you about certain events at Gettysburg that might require official attention. A veteran of Chinese origin has been performing unauthorized rituals on the battlefield, creating symbols and marks that are causing unrest among other veterans and visitors. I recommend measures be taken to prevent future activities of this type." The letter was signed by Colonel Robert Hayes, who had been assigned to supervise commemorative activities at Gettysburg. But most intriguing was a handwritten note in the margin, "Matter resolved. Chen has departed. Symbol will remain as reminder." Reminder of what? Sarah wondered aloud. Further research into Colonel Hayes revealed a man with interests that extended beyond military affairs. Hayes had been a student of comparative religion and had written several articles about the spiritual dimensions of warfare. His personal papers, housed at the Army War College, contained extensive notes about what he called battlefield sanctification, the process of transforming places of violence into places of healing. Hayes had apparently understood and even supported Chen's work, seeing it as part of a larger effort to heal the spiritual wounds of the Civil War. His decision to let the symbol remain suggested he believed it served a valuable purpose, even if that purpose wasn't widely understood. To fully understand the meaning of Chen's symbol, Sarah decided to consult with experts in Chinese spiritual traditions. Master Liu Zhang, a scholar in Eastern philosophy at the University of California at Berkeley, agreed to examine all the evidence they had compiled. "What Chen Weiming created," Master Liu explained, after studying the photographs and medallion, "is what we call in Chinese tradition a spiritual harmony symbol. It's designed to honor the dead and create a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds." According to Master Liu, Chen had used principles of Feng Shui and Chinese sacred geometry to create a symbol that would serve as a focal point for spiritual energy. The location near Little Round Top hadn't been casual. Chen had chosen a place where great loss of life had occurred, believing that the souls of the fallen needed to be honored and guided toward peace. In Chinese tradition, Master Liu continued, when many people die violently in one place, their spirits can become trapped, causing unrest for both the living and the dead. Chen created this symbol as a way to release those souls and bring peace to the place. Master Liu's analysis revealed the sophisticated nature of Chen's work. The symbol incorporated elements from multiple Chinese spiritual traditions, Taoist principles of balance and harmony, Buddhist concepts of compassion and liberation, and Confucian ease of honor and remembrance. The double circle represents the cycle of life and death, Master Liu explained, tracing the pattern with his finger. The diagonal lines are pathways for spiritual energy to flow. The precise proportions create what we call a harmony field, a space where conflicting energies can be balanced and resolved. But Master Liu also identified elements that weren't purely Chinese. Chen has incorporated Western symbolic elements as well. He noted, these geometric patterns here resemble Celtic knotwork, and these proportions follow principles found in European sacred architecture. He was creating something new, a synthesis of Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. This explanation resonated with the reports of unusual activity that Sarah had found in park archives. The strange lights and unexplained sounds reported by visitors might have been manifestations of the spiritual energy that Chen had been trying to harmonize. But a crucial question remained: had Chen's ritual worked? To investigate this, Sarah decided to examine records of paranormal activity reported at Gettysburg over the year. What she found was surprising. After 1901, reports of supernal activity in the Little Round Top area had decreased significantly, while in other parts of the battlefield they had remained constant or even increased. It's as if Chen had actually achieved what he set out to do, Harrison commented while reviewing the data. Pacify the spirits in that specific area of the battlefield. Sarah's research into paranormal reports revealed a fascinating pattern. Before 1900, the Little Round Top area had been one of the most active sites for supernatural encounters at Gettysburg. Visitors regularly reported seeing ghostly soldiers, hearing phantom gunfire, and experiencing overwhelming feelings of sadness and fear. After 1901, these reports dropped dramatically. The few supernatural encounters that were reported in the area had a different character. Instead of frightening or disturbing experiences, visitors described the feelings of peace, comfort, and resolution. Some reported seeing figures in period dress who seemed to be at rest rather than in distress. The change is statistically significant, Sarah noted as she compiled the data. Whatever Chen did, it seems to have fundamentally altered the spiritual atmosphere of that location. Sarah had been corresponding with Chinese historians to obtain more information about the traditions Chen had used. What she discovered added another layer of complexity to the story. Chen Wei-min hadn't been simply a diplomat or spy. He had been a practitioner of an ancient Chinese tradition known as battlefield harmonization. This practice, dating back thousands of years, involves specific rituals to pacify the souls of fallen warriors and restore spiritual balance to places of great violence. Chen saw in Gettysburg an opportunity to apply this ancient wisdom to a completely new context, Professor Sang Wei from Beijing University explained in an email. He would have considered his work there a sacred mission, not only to honor the American dead, but to demonstrate that Chinese wisdom could contribute to the healing of the American nation. Professor Sang provided additional context about the tradition Chen had practiced. Battlefield harmonization was typically performed by scholar warriors who had training in both military arts and spiritual practice. They would visit sites of great battles and perform rituals to help the spirits of the dead find peace. This was considered essential for the spiritual health of the entire region. The practice involved several stages. The practitioner would study the battlefield to understand the flow of spiritual energy. Then they would identify the most appropriate location for a harmony symbol. Finally, they would perform rituals to activate the symbol and establish it as a focal point for healing energy. Chen's work at Gettysburg follows this traditional pattern exactly, Professor Sang noted, but he adapted the practice to work within American cultural and religious contexts. This required considerable skill and cultural sensitivity. 6 months after the initial discovery, Sarah and her team had reconstructed an extraordinary stories that had remained hidden for more than a century. Chen Wei-ming had been much more than a mysterious veteran. He had been a cultural bridge who had tried to apply Chinese spiritual wisdom to heal the wounds of the American Civil War. But a final mystery remained. What had happened to Chen? The answer came through California Historical Society archives. Chen had returned to San Francisco after his work at Gettysburg, where he had established a small school to teach Chinese philosophy to immigrants and interested Americans. He had lived quietly until his death in 1918, never publicly revealing his work at Gettysburg. But he had left a legacy. In his personal writings, found after his death, Chen had meticulously documented his methods and philosophy. These writings had been preserved by his students and eventually donated to the University of California. Chen believed his work at Gettysburg was only the beginning. Dr. Wang explained after examining the writings, he had plans to apply similar techniques to other American battlefields, but never had the opportunity to do so. The writings revealed that Chen had seen his symbol at Gettysburg as a prototype, an experiment to see if Chinese spiritual harmonization techniques could work in the American context. The apparent success of his work had filled him with hope for future application. Chen's writings provided detailed instructions for battlefield harmonization, adapted for American conditions. He had studied American spiritual traditions, Native American practices, Christian mysticism, and even emerging spiritualist movements, looking for common ground where Eastern and Western approaches to healing could meet. He was remarkably sophisticated in his understanding of cultural adaptation. Dr. Wang noted, Chen realized that spiritual practices couldn't simply be transplanted from one culture to another. They had to be carefully adapted to work within the existing belief systems and cultural frameworks. Chen's post-war writings revealed his broader vision for America. He believed the Civil War had created spiritual wounds that went beyond the political and social divisions that were being addressed through Reconstruction. These spiritual wounds, if left untreated, would continue to cause problems for generations. Chen saw America as a young nation with great potential but also great spiritual challenges. Dr. Wang explained, he believed that Eastern wisdom could help America fulfill its potential by healing the spiritual damage caused by slavery and civil war. The writings also revealed Chen's frustration with the limitations he faced. As a Chinese immigrant in an era of increasing anti-Asian sentiment, he had to work carefully and quietly. His efforts to establish harmony symbols at other battlefields had been met with suspicion and sometimes hostility. He wrote about the irony of his situation, Dr. Wang noted. He had risked his life fighting for American freedom, but was still seen as a foreigner whose spiritual practices were viewed with suspicion. Despite these challenges, Chen had continued his work through his school in San Francisco. He had trained a small group of students in battlefield harmonization techniques, hoping they could continue the work after his death. Some of these students had been Chinese immigrants, but others had been Americans interested in Eastern philosophy. Sarah decided it was important that this story be known. She prepared a detailed academic article that was published in the Journal of Civil War History, causing a sensation in the academic community. Chen Wei-ming's story reminds us that the American Civil War had impacts and participants that go far beyond what we traditionally consider. Sarah wrote in her conclusion, his work at Gettysburg represents a unique example of cultural exchange and spiritual healing that deserves to be remembered and studied. The article sparked intense debate among historians. Some questioned whether Chen's spiritual practices had any real effect. arguing that the changes in paranormal reports could be explained by other factors. Others saw Chen's work as an important example of how immigrant communities had contributed to American healing and reconciliation. The National Park Service, impressed by the research, decided to install a commemorative plaque near the site where Chen had placed his symbol. The plaque honored both Chen and all the veterans who had participated in the early Gettysburg reunions, recognizing their role in the nation's healing. But perhaps the most important legacy of the discovery was the new perspective it provided on the diversity of experiences during and after the Civil War. Chen's story demonstrated that even in the 19th century, the United States had been a place where different cultural traditions could meet and create something new and valuable. Chen Weiming teaches us that healing can come from unexpected sources. Sarah reflected during a conference at Gettysburg, a year after the discovery. His symbol remains there, on that stone, reminding us that respect for the fallen and the desire for peace transcend all cultural boundaries. The discovery had also inspired new research into the experiences of other immigrant veterans of the Civil War. Historians began looking more carefully at the contributions of Irish, German, Italian, and other immigrant soldiers, finding stories of cultural adaptation and innovation that had previously been overlooked. Chen's story is probably not unique, Harrison said. There were likely other immigrant veterans who brought their own cultural practices to bear on the challenges of post-war healing. We just haven't found their stories yet. The Uno photograph that had initiated the entire investigation now was displayed at the Gettysburg Visitor Center, accompanied by the complete story of Chen Weiming and his extraordinary legacy. Visitors often stopped before the image, fascinated by the idea that such a small symbol could contain such a rich and complex story. The exhibit had become one of the most popular at the visitor center, drawing people interested not just in Civil War history, but in stories of cultural exchange and spiritual healing. Many visitors reported feeling moved by Chen's story and inspired by his example of using cultural differences as a source of strength rather than division. And on the battlefield, near Little Round Top, the stone with Chen's symbol continued its silent vigil, a permanent reminder that history always has more chapters to reveal, and that healing and understanding can come from the most unexpected sources. Sarah's work had once again demonstrated that every historical photograph is potentially a treasure trove of information waiting to be discovered. But more importantly, it had revealed a story of compassion, wisdom, and hope that had been hidden for more than a century, waiting for the right moment to be told. The symbol had begun to attract visitors from around the world. People came to meditate at the site, to pay their respects to Chen's memory, and to experience what many described as a profound sense of peace and healing. The National Park Service had to establish guidelines for these visits to ensure they didn't interfere with other battlefield activities. It's become a pilgrimage site, the park superintendent observed. People from many different spiritual traditions come here, but they all seem to understand and respect what Chen was trying to accomplish. In the final words of her book about the discovery, Sarah wrote, Chen Weiming reminds us that true healing requires not only time, but also understanding, respect, and the willingness to learn from traditions different from our own. His symbol at Gettysburg remains a testament that peace is possible even in places where war has left its deepest scars. The story had grown beyond academic interest to become a source of inspiration for people working on reconciliation and healing in contemporary conflicts. Chen's example of using cultural wisdom to address spiritual wounds had been studied by peace workers, therapists, and spiritual leaders around the world. Chen showed us that healing is not just about forgetting the past or moving on. Sarah reflected in her final interview about the project. It's about transforming pain into wisdom, division into understanding, and death into a deeper appreciation for life. His symbol continues to do that work, more than a century after he created it. The photograph that had started it all remained a powerful reminder that history is full of hidden stories waiting to be discovered. But Chen Weiming's story had become something more, a bridge between past and present, east and west, and between the wounds of war and the possibility of peace.